Well, it's been almost a year since the PlayStation Vita launched, so I think it's time to look back at the very best of the system's games from 2012. So here's my top 10... Oh, wait. I didn't actually play 10 PS Vita games in 2012. This is awkward. Oh well, I guess here's my top 5 PS Vita games of 2012. Yeah, that'll do. Number 5. Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. Released as a Vita exclusive, Liberation is a completely separate story from its console counterparts. Starring the series' first female assassin, Aveline, you travel 18th century New Orleans, which I guess that makes it old New Orleans? Doing what the series does best, assassinate people, and also slowly follow them too. Liberation does well to emulate the Assassin's Creed feel for on the go. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop feels as great as it's ever been, but it grinds to a halt when you have to get up close and personal. The combat just feels very loose, which has always been a problem for the series, but it's even more prominent in Liberation. This isn't the game to make you buy a Vita, but if the yearly cycle of console Assassin's Creed isn't enough, then I would recommend you pick up Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. Number 4. Gravity Rush. Now, if there's one game on this list that sums up the Vita perfectly, it's this one. It plays well, looks fantastic, but it has a lot of untapped potential and ultimately only appeals to a niche audience. You play as the amnesia-suffering Cat as she discovers who she is and what her purpose is. With help from her mysterious furry friend Dusty, Cat can shift gravity around her to travel the world. This mechanic, while slightly disorientating at first, is great fun to use as it essentially feels like you're flying, only all you're really doing is falling. Gravity Rush isn't just about falling around a huge city, as the other half of the game is centered around combat. Using the gravity to your advantage, you can, as the title suggests, rush at enemies and attack their glaring weak spots. This is unfortunately the biggest fault I have with the game, because the fights boil down to nothing more than darting towards an enemy, attacking and then darting back away to keep yourself from being open to other hostile attacks. Luckily, this doesn't completely subtract from the gorgeous art design, interesting story and the joy of just shifting gravity around to travel. It's still at least worth checking out if you like action-adventure JRPG hybrids, but it's not the game to save the stumbling Vita like everyone had hoped. Number 3. Tales from Space, Mutant Blobs Attack. Now, this does break my retail only rule, but Mutant Blobs Attack is such a charming game that I just couldn't leave it off the list. That, and I didn't really want Black Ops Declassified making the 5th spot. You play as an alien slime gobbling up anything and everything that's small enough to consume, so you can progress to the next area. Half the joy comes from starting as small as a penny and level by level growing in size until you're as big as a... well, I won't spoil it, but let's just say think Katamari but more of a 2D platformer puzzler in a 50s B-movie style. The blob control's great jumping all over stuff. The only gripe I actually have is using the touchscreen to move certain platforms, which can be slightly cumbersome to use when moving blob at the same time. That aside, I can't recommend Mutant Blobs Attack enough if you want a downloadable only game on the Vita. Number 2. Uncharted Golden Abyss. Starting off the Vita with a bang, Nathan Drake returned in 2012 for another action-filled adventure. There were slight worries at first with the absence of series creators Naughty Dog, but Ben Studios did a successful job in bringing Uncharted to a handheld. It plays great, it feels great, and it looks fantastic, all while integrating some unique Vita mechanics like chalk rubbings and assist motion aiming. There are some awkwardly forced mechanics like balancing and touchscreen combat, but for the most part they're largely optional. The acting and characters are still on par with what we've come to expect from the Uncharted series, which is nothing short of stellar. Even though the story itself is mostly forgettable and the lack of any real multiplayer harms its overall longevity, this is still a solid game that's definitely worth anyone's time for fans and newcomers alike. And number 1. PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Yes, the ultimate comparison to Smash Brothers is inevitable, but underneath the similar core mechanics, PlayStation All-Stars plays very much a different game. Rather than building up your foe's percentage meter to knock them out of the stage, you build up your own meter to gain supers. With every attack you land, you build up your super to either level 1, 2 or 3 to earn points by defeating your opponents. Level 1 supers can only take out 1, maybe 2 opponents, whereas level 2 and 3 can take out multiple characters at a time. It's a neat little mechanic that adds a nice layer of strategy to the game on knowing whether to use your super prematurely or save it up for later. The best thing about the Vita version? Well, it's the fact that it's the exact same game as the PS3 version. Characters, stages, trophies, online, it's all here. The biggest problem that I have with the game is that core mechanic wise it doesn't do enough to separate itself from Smash Brothers. And it just doesn't compete in terms of content. There aren't enough modes and the character roster doesn't have the iconic likes of Mario, Link or Pikachu. But if like me you're eagerly awaiting Smash 4, then PlayStation All-Stars is the best alternative. Yes, it's not as good as Smash, but that doesn't make it a bad one. It's still a very, very solid fighter that any PS Vita or PS3 owner should have. So that was my top 5 PS Vita games of 2012, and while it wasn't anywhere near as successful as Sony had hoped, there are still some great games in the system that I didn't even touch on. Plus a bunch of exciting games to come in 2013 like Killzone and fuck, I wasted 300 quid on this piece of shit.